I was curious to know which two U.S. citizens live the furthest apart. Now, we're counting only U.S. citizens who live in the United States. So, my first thought was to see who in the lower 48 states live the furthest away from each other. So, if we look from Maine over to California, that looks like it could be pretty far. It's definitely further than Washington or Texas, so it's about 2,830 miles. But then if we measure the other way from southern Florida up to Washington, it is just slightly further to go up that way. So the two furthest people in the lower 48 states are going to be somebody in southern Florida and somebody else in northwestern Washington. But obviously, that's not the only U.S. states we have. We also have Hawaii. So we start in Hawaii and go over to the continental U.S. It does look like Maine is going to be the furthest state away from Hawaii. And it looks like 5,232 miles there. But not only Maine, we also have Alaska up here. And Alaska, definitely on a map, does look further away. So let's try Hawaii to Alaska. It's actually not that far. So let's try Alaska, actually Florida up to Alaska. I'm not quite sure which point would be the furthest, but it looks like the further west we go, it's further away. And actually, there's these tiny islands out here that some people live on. So there, I think, is the furthest, 5,500 miles. But let's also try from Maine, because Maine could be even further. Nope, it looks like, I think Florida is the furthest from Alaska. 5,500. Yep. So we're getting further, but so if you're talking just the 50 states, it would be somebody in Alaska and somebody in southern Florida are going to be the furthest two U.S. citizens apart. But we also have some territories. So we have Puerto Rico, we have Guam, we have American Samoa. There are some other ones, but I think in terms of distance away, the other smaller ones are going to be closer than Guam or American Samoa. We will try American Samoa first, just because I think it's not furthest. So there's American Samoa. If we try up to Alaska, it's about only 6,000 miles, but over to like Maine is much further. So I think that's going to be the furthest from American Samoa. So we are definitely getting further and further. So about 7,600 miles. But now we need to try out Guam, because I'm pretty sure Guam is further. First, we need to find Guam. There it is. So I'm guessing if it would be southern Guam. So we're going to click southern Guam right there. And we're going to try first up to Alaska. But again, it's not as far, nearly. And just looking at a map, you would think Maine is the furthest. But since the Earth is round, it's actually going to be down in Florida. That's even further. But then we can't forget about Puerto Rico. So it does look like this is going to be the furthest two Americans can live from each other, is if you live in southern Guam and southeastern Puerto Rico. So I'll probably say right here, 9,447 miles is the furthest that two Americans can live in America away from each other. There we have it. And that's pretty impressive because the equator is 25,000 miles around, or almost 25,000. So the closest or the furthest you can get away from another person would be about 12,400 miles. So this is pretty far in terms of still being the same country. But there we have it. If you live in Guam and if you live in Puerto Rico, you're the furthest two Americans away from each other.